If I was picking the All Black team to take the field tomorrow, I'd be putting Ardie back at number 7. So the first team at the moment is the Chiefs and the last team is Moana Pacifica. So if you take those 2 out of the 11 teams, the other 9, anyone could beat anyone. I mean, you mentioned Kirifi before, and I reckon he's an outstanding open side flanker. He's a specialised open side flanker. Whether he's as good as he is in Super Rugby at international level, I don't know. You know, you're on the money, Marty. I mean, you often amaze me, actually, how much you sort of have learnt over the years.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Rugby, Super Rugby, 6 rounds played, and what a great start to the competition it has been this year. We're saying this every week because it deserves to be said every week. And joining us for the first time this season, he's such a special guest for us, Murray Mexted. Played well over 70 games for the All Blacks, never gave up that jersey till he decided to actually give up that jersey, if you know what I mean. Changed the way the number 8 position was played. And we always talk to Mex when it comes into All Blacks season. His expert analysis, especially on the loose forwards and the combinations thereof. So we thought, let's go early. Let's get him on early and pick his brain about what he's been seeing so far. So it's always a warm welcome back, mate. Love having you on board.
Yeah, no, nice to be here, Marty.
Sad news over the weekend, though. Let's start with that. Grizz Wyllie, Alex Wyllie. I know that you knew him well, and I've been saying over the last couple of days, I'm very fortunate when I started doing radio sport that I got to spend a lot of time around people like this, in the various roles that he's had, and also just sitting down with him as a person as well. And I always thoroughly enjoyed his company, Mex. He was just very engaging. You knew where you stood with him. As a player, my dad used to talk about him all the time. He had that real aura and reputation around him, but that's enough from me. You tell us.
Yeah, well, I don't really know him. I don't know him as well as you, actually, Marty. I've only ever met him on the field.
Okay.
And that wasn't much fun either, to tell you the truth, because, his nickname tells it all, doesn't it? I mean, he's not exactly a happy chappy when he's playing rugby, but that was the generation in those days. I mean, he's a decade older than me, remember? And, you stepped into that sort of world and it was sort of, stand up or bugger off in many respects. It was a different type of approach to the game. I think, performance has been through decades of improvement since Grizz's day, so it's very hard to sort of equate. But, I mean, one thing's for sure, in his time, he was the man, wasn't he? And he went on and gave a lot to rugby. As a coach down south. He played a lot of provincial rugby too, I think, several hundred matches, which sounds ridiculous. When you look at the honours board at the Wellington Rugby Union, there's only about 10 people that have played over 100 games. And I think, did he play 200 or something like that?
210.
Yeah,
so it's over about 20 years because they didn't play what they play at the moment. You don't play 15 games a year, so, he went forever.
No, that's right. But the interesting thing, I think, is that the psychology of the game has changed. I think back in those days, intimidation was a prerequisite if you were a forward. And, I mean, it goes with the territory when you look at Grizz Wyllie. We call him Grizz Wyllie. He looked like he was bloody unhappy about everything every moment you looked at him on the TV screen.
Yep.
For a young fella coming up, it was daunting, I will say, but a challenge. I think most rugby players that succeed love a challenge because why else did you play it? It wasn't a professional game.
Yep.
So for me, it was a fantastic opportunity. I mean, I think there was a headline in the Dominion before that game that said, "Old Warhorse versus up-and-comer."
Wow.
I mean, it was setting me up, wasn't it?
Oh,
for
yeah.
a fall,
yes.
I would say, and fall I did. But, after I won my first line out, I don't even know it was him because I was blindsided and I was held up by the ruck, or the maul actually. And as the maul, I can remember this, I was stunned but not out. And as the maul disappeared, I sunk to my knees. And I remember Graham Williams coming up to me and saying, "Don't show you're hurt." that was the game.
No,
As he helped me onto my feet, holding me under my elbow, and walked me with the head spinning towards the next scrum. Those were different days, really, weren't they?
Yeah.
And intimidation was the name in many respects, and he was good at that, I guess. But he's given a hell of a lot to the game.
Yeah, he has. Let's turn our attention to what you've seen over the last first 6 weeks of Super Rugby, and especially that combination of 6, 7, 8. And there's been a lot of names thrown around, and it's always good to see, when you think, okay, right, well, what's Razor got in front of him? He's got incumbents, but he's also got these extra names. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about, I introduced this topic over the weekend through Nigel Yalden about replacing Sam Cane, and I didn't realise that just so many people in this country, it seems, have got something against Sam Cane, and I was trying to argue with a few, but you know what it's like arguing on social media. It's a pointless exercise, Mex. But just for what it's worth, my thoughts being that, look, when you played 100 games for the All Blacks across 3 different coaches, then 3 different brains trusts have decided that what you bring in, what you offer, the level of your performance, the consistency of your performance is obviously at a level that you are a player that they're more than interested in to keep you in that side. And so that says to me, whatever I think or anyone else thinks, when Shag and Fozzie and Razor, those 3 brains have all said, this is my guy and I'm prepared to play him, that says more than anyone else needs to say in my book. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, you're on the money, Marty. I mean, you often amaze me, actually, how much you sort of have learnt over the years about the game.
From the experts, mate.
You're quite astute. I think it's an astute comment. I think that, there's a lot of debate over every position. But the loose forwards, I think and I've been banging on about this for a long time, the loose forwards are a trio. Yes. And they have different roles. And they have different roles because they have different access to the ball. And you've got to pick accordingly. Now, Sam Cane wasn't a flashy player. But when he played open side flanker, he always had a focus on the ball, and he was bloody good at it. I mean, McCaw before him was the master, wasn't he?
Yes.
And Sam Cane was, in some respects, his apprentice. And, there's no doubt about it, they were both outstanding open side flankers. So I don't know what all the furore's about. I mean, at the moment, when I look around the teams, I often think, they're in the wrong position on the scrum. To do with their skill set and the role of that particular number, 6, 7 and 8. And to simplify it really easily is the blindside flanker, or number 6 in our language, he doesn't have the access to the ball because the ball often goes to the open side. So he's a different type of player. But the bottom line is you've got to have 2. You've definitely got to have one really good aerial possession exponent in that loose forward trio.
Yep.
And I'm not sure we have that at the moment in our All Black team. Razor should have learnt that in South Africa. We went over there, played 2, lost 2. So not good enough really for an All Black team. And he'll know that. Where did we lose him? Well, we didn't win enough ball.
Yeah.
So not only did we have 2 locks that weren't probably quite big enough, because I think Bayer played at lock in that game. Well, he'd be 3 inches shorter than the guy who was marking. And we didn't really have a loose forward that was competitive either when you look at the opposition. And you've got to look at the opposition too, and that exposes your limitations. Those players that were probably too small against the Springboks in aerial possession are probably good against 90% of the rest of the teams in the world.
Yeah, that's fair, yeah.
We're not satisfied with beating the lower teams. We want to beat every team.
Yes,
and especially them is the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
And if you're going to win there, you've got to win more than your share of ball, or at least as much. But actually, if you win 50% of ball, you're probably still not going to beat South Africa in South Africa, because there's things like altitude. There's things like the influence of the referee, whether that's good or bad. Doesn't matter, but you've got to really have more than 50% to win the bloody thing. So you've got to have 1 or 2 guys in the loose forwards that can win the ball. So I don't see that at the moment. I think that's one of the problems with the Blues too. I think that they've got loose forwards playing out of position, in my view. And it's only my view, but you have to say, well, why aren't they dominating in possession? And you've got to look at the reasons why. Look at the different phases.
Do you think,
anyway,
Mex, that the changes in the game, and there is so much more accent now on the breakdown, that the loose forwards that have been, that's kind of the first job that they're being tasked to do, is to get over that ball, to win that ball, to physically contest that area more. Has that changed?
It has changed a little bit, I will say, but it's still a focus. I mean, what is the core role of an open side flanker? Is to retain and regain the ball.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
It's changed in so much as wherever the breakdown is, the closest player becomes the open side flanker of days.
Because we saw the Crusaders hooker do it a couple of times, who just happened to be there, and he was the guy that was first over the ball, winning that ball back, getting possession back. So that's almost like a dual role then, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that guy may have been standing out on the short side, and the player, it might have been three phases where the ball eventually came back to where he was, and then he was the closest person. So that's an example of whoever the person is that's closest to the ball when the breakdown occurs, he becomes the retainer or the regainer of possession. But you've got to have, the Lone Ranger needed Tonto. I often say that.
Yep.
And so he's got to have someone else there, and that's when the open side flanker really should be sniffing around. That's his job. It's not a glory position. I mean,
I think a lot of people that's why they misconstrue what Kane's contribution was, because Richie McCaw is Richie McCaw, but you can't compare the two players. It's like, you're trying to compare another flanker to Michael Jones. I mean, it's just, you can't. I mean, these are very special players. But what he did as core role, Sam Cane, was, as I keep saying, these coaches aren't stupid. They're not picking somebody that's not performing for them every week. So when we look at number 7 now, are we looking to replace Sam Cane like for like, or are you looking at more thinking, okay, how do I rejig this whole loose forward trio?
No, I'd be looking at the best open side flanker in the country, and that's the first position you pick in your loose forward trio.
Okay.
So who's the best open side? Marty, you're on the spot a little bit here, but I'm going to say to you, because this is what happens every time I go to the pub. Someone asks me a question like this. So I'm going to say to you, well, who would you play at open side flanker?
Well, I think that Du Plessis is playing as well as anybody, but then again, I'm not so sure that I wouldn't put Ardie there and then look to change number 8 if Satiti's there, because of what you're saying about the height and the line out. And I think Ardie can easily play that role and play it really well. And if you're looking at the best number 7 in the country, well, even though he's not playing number 7, is he still the best number 7? Long-winded answer, I'm sorry.
No, but it's quite accurate, actually. Me too. If I was picking the All Black team to take the field tomorrow, I'd be putting Ardie back at number 7, like I did when he came to Irons when he was 19 years of age.
There you go.
He was playing number 8 at that stage, and when we looked at the height of his mother, etc., we could see that he was never going to be 6'5", and the similar skill set required for a 7 and an 8, and we converted him to a 7, and he played 7 pretty much.
Could he still play there, do you think? Even though he hasn't played there?
Yeah, old dogs, new tricks maybe, but you don't forget the ones you have. Right. He's still an outstanding rugby player, and he's got a nose for the ball. And if anybody can change from an 8 to a 7 seamlessly, it's Ardie Savea.
Right.
And he's such a good rugby player, and that's where I'd like to see him playing for the next All Black. Next time the All Black team's selected, I'd like to see him as a specialist 7, and I'd like us to find a new or a satisfactory 6 and 8, and one, maybe 2 of those have got to be ball winners.
See, what that does is that opens the door, doesn't it? That opens the door for Satiti, who was at 8, and Razor played him at 6 against South Africa, and he played really well in that position. But that opens the door again to maybe putting him back to 8, and then you've got somebody like a Blackadder who adds some extra height, maybe at a 6. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, and Razor will know best on that. If he's thinking about that, he knows that the first person you pick is your number 7.
Yep.
And you've got to have a good one. If you haven't, then there's 100 reasons why the team isn't performing. Mm-hmm. And in some respects, you can look at the Blues. Why aren't the Blues doing better? Well, is there an open side flanker and open side flanker? I don't think he is. I think he's a number 8 or a blind side. So where's your issue? There's an issue right there, in my view.
Are you also looking at the loose forward trio in terms of, okay, we've got France to start with, but you're looking at it towards South Africa. Those two tests this year are the biggest tests that we're going to face, even no disrespect to the end of year tour, but to me, the job has got to be beating South Africa twice in this country. That's the measure, right?
Yeah, that is, absolutely. And we want to do that. I mean, you mentioned Kirifi before, and I reckon he's an outstanding open side flanker. He's a specialised open side flanker. Yep. And we want a guy to specialise in that role who's good. Whether he's as good as he is in Super Rugby at international level, I don't know.
None of us know yet, no.
I don't know. We have never seen that.
No.
Maybe we'll find out one day. Who knows? But at the moment, the best open side flanker
is Ardie
Savea.
Would that mean you'd like Satiti to come back at 8? Because their combination is good. I mean, I like the fact that they played All Black tests together. They've played half a dozen or 8 tests together. That they obviously work in tandem together really well. And so, rather than trying to get 3 new people trying to get in that combination, you've at least got the 2. You're just readjusting positions from here round to here. And as I say, that leaves then open to, I don't know whether Scott Barrett will ever go back to 6, probably not. But there's your line-out position, if that's the case, because those 2 aren't the height that you're looking for, but that gives you the option there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Satiti can play 6 or 8. I don't think there's an issue there. I don't think he's a 7. So it just depends on who else is going to put their hand up and say, hey, I'm one of the best ball winners in the world and I'm a loose forward.
Right.
I like the idea of Blackadder because he's such a good rugby player.
He's a brilliant, but it's just the injuries. I mean, if we can keep him on the field for an elongated period of time, I like him as well. I like Callum Grace as well, but I just think there's something about Blackadder. I don't know. When he plays, you know what they call it in the NFL mix? They make plays. And I know that, it's kind of language thing, I suppose. It doesn't work with rugby, but that's what I think he does. He does things. He makes a difference when he plays.
Yeah, I mean, my problem, of course, is that we actually need, it's not my problem, it's New Zealand's problem.
Yep.
We actually need a guy who's 6'6".
Yeah.
I mean, we need another Kieran Reid. We need another Jamie Joseph. We need, I'm talking about Jamie Joseph because he's in my mind because he's obviously turned the Highlanders around and
he's
really
got them
are
combative, isn't he? And competitive, yeah. Hell yes.
Big loose forwards have the ability to win ball.
He was 6'6", wasn't he? He was a big boy. Kano, I'd say 6'5".
Kieran Reid. Now, that's not so long ago, but there's not that many of them, and there's a couple floating around. I've been really interested, Marty, in watching the Chiefs play because I think that McMillan's done a really good job at building depth, and I think that's one thing that's pretty apparent today. Nobody plays week in, week out forever, do they?
No.
Back in my day, you did. You played every game.
What you did. You played every game, mate. That's it. They had no rest. You played midweek games for the All Blacks as well, mate.
Yeah, and you had your rest after the game when you had a few beers. That was a rest. But you're expected to be training the next day.
Can you imagine somebody with a clipboard and the nutritionists these days saying that? Okay, you can have your rest. You can have a couple of quiet beers. I know it's all changed,
sometimes those guys actually carry too much weight. And,
I believe.
The head coach who listens too much to the strength and conditioning guy and the nutritionist, is going to come second because you've got to identify and let's talk about this. It's called mental skills. Who is mentally strong and performed in the role at the highest level, and that's why I'm so keen on Ardie playing open side flanker. He's the only one at the moment who has performed at international level. As an open side flanker, week in, week out.
Yeah, I mean, he never has a bad game.
He's been there, done that.
Yeah,
and he's not an old man; he's a young man still. So, and he's been having a bit of a holiday, hasn't he? Recently, so he's resting up, waiting for the. He'll probably be upset if he hears me saying that because he's on a mission with Moana Pacifica.
Yeah,
and he's
got bigger challenges though. Yeah,
but they've got a long way to go. In my view.
But he's got much bigger challenges ahead of him this year, and we need he's such an integral part of the team. How are you rating the Crusaders and their comeback? Because you know what the Cantabs are like, man. You played them so many times. When they're down, you got to keep them down because they're bouncing straight back up, and that's what they've done.
Maybe, Maybe. I'm not convinced yet, actually.
Okay.
The way I look at this competition, there's 11 teams, right?
Yep.
We've got an odd number. Okay. So 11 teams. So I reckon you take out the number one and the first team and the last team. So the first team at the moment is the Chiefs and the last team is Moana Pacifica.
Yep.
So if you take those two out of the 11 teams, the other 9, anyone could beat anyone. Anyone could beat anyone.
Really? You think the Drua can beat all those teams?
In Fiji?
Oh, in Fiji
absolutely.
They can. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. How many teams have won in Fiji recently?
Not many, mate.
No. So I reckon it's a great competition because of that.
Brumbies, yeah.
Instead of, take out the one at the top and the one at the bottom and
then look at the median.
Great competition. So there's going to be some changes. We're only halfway through the competition. The Australian teams are up there. But by the time we get to the end of the competition, they'll be down the bottom again.
Well, 4 of them in the top 6. I don't know. I think at least 2 of them are going to make the 6, if
do you
not 3.
Want a side bet on that?
Let's
have
do that.
A side bet.
Let's do that.
If they're going to be down in the bottom 4 or 5 teams, there might be 1 or 2 that beat.
Well, you pick how many? 1 or 2? I reckon 2 are going to make it at least.
Into what? The top 4?
Top 6.
Top 6.
Yep. I think you got the Chiefs, 6. Crusaders. I reckon that the Reds in New South Wales.
If 2 of them don't make the top 6, then the competition's not strong enough to develop players that are good enough to beat the world in their backyard. So that's a worry. But I think the competition this year looks good to me because it's so competitive. As I say, 9 teams, really competitive. So,
It's been a great 6 rounds so far, mate.
Yeah, but it's only halfway. And it's good that you take one Australian team out. It has strengthened them. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Will they be strong enough? Not sure. You see there's a bit of improvement in just about each of those teams. Is any not improved? Brumbies are probably the same as they have been there or thereabouts. The Waratahs look like they might be improving.
Yeah.
The Reds look like
they are
improving. And the Force have even shown us a little bit this year, more than the past.
Yep.
So, it's a good competition, and I'm happy with it. And it's going to be a really interesting second round. And they're playing a great brand of rugby. And you'd have to say the rules that they've adjusted slightly, allowing the halfback to clear the ball and stuff like that, is got to be good for the game. And it's got to be good for entertainment factor. In fact, we deserve to be getting more people on the grounds, in my view.
Yeah, totally agree. Mex, it's always a pleasure catching up, mate. Let's do this again.
Okay.
This is the DSPN.